Put your hands up, yeah. To the floor, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Come down, selector.
That's right. Come on.
Juneteenth, short for June 19th, is the day commemorating the end of slavery in the United States. It's a holiday that has been celebrated since 1866 and represents a critical turning point in American history. Open up a classroom history book, and the author might say that slavery ended on January 1st, 1863. The day when President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, it established that all enslaved people in the Confederate States in the rebellion against the Union shall be then, thenceforth, and forever free. Of course, the proclamation stated this, but it did not instantly free any enslaved people. It would take another 2 years for slavery to end in the United States. In Texas, slavery continued uninterrupted during the Civil War. The state wasn't involved in large-scale battles, and there wasn't a real presence of Union troops. 2 months after the war came to a close, U.S. General Gordon Granger arrived on Texas soil and read General Order No. 3. The people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. Granger's arrival marked the freedom for 250,000 enslaved people in the state. Although emancipation didn't happen overnight, celebrations broke out among newly freed black people. Juneteenth was born. The following year, freed people in Texas organized the first of what became the annual celebration of Jubilee Day on June 19th. The holiday wasn't widely celebrated across the country, but the traditions continued to grow over the next several decades. By 1979, Texas became the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. Finally, in June 2021, Congress passed a resolution establishing Juneteenth as a national holiday.
And now we take you live to the East Room of the White House, where President Biden is going to sign the law making Juneteenth a national holiday.
All right.
Juneteenth marks a date of major significance in American history. It's the longest tradition of celebrating the emancipation of thousands of enslaved people who forcibly worked and lived in inhumane conditions. The 2-year march from when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed to the arrival of troops in Texas is a metaphor for the many ways in which freedoms for black people have been delayed in this country. Today, the holiday is a way to acknowledge past faults, help heal current divisions, and move toward a future of a more perfect union.
Hey, we want to welcome everybody to another episode of You and the Law podcast show. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show. Virgil Green, as always. The dude sitting over to the left of me goes by the name of Chief Swaggy One. I'm gonna put some swag on that man. Swaggy One.
Dude, you haven't earned the right to do that.
Hey man, I'm controlled.
You're getting a little bit, Virgil, you're getting a little bit too forward, man. You think you're getting a little bit too informal, man. You swaggy one and this one and stuff like that, man.
Hey, brother. I mean, I'm just trying to put a little behind the hump of Swaggy One.
Whatever, man. Hello, everybody out there listening, man. How y'all doing? My man V, what's happening, brother?
Man, I'm doing good, man. I'm
Well, we're
glad
not
we've
we're
got.
not going to have no Skip and Shannon moment either, man. Today, man. So we're not doing that.
No, we're not. We got a special podcast show that we're going to be talking about. As everybody know, this coming weekend is going to be everybody's going to be celebrating Juneteenth, and so we're going to be talking about the Juneteenth celebration of freedom. So hopefully, those who are tuning in, uh, you know, if you got some comments, put them in the chat room. Uh, Let us know what your thoughts are about Juneteenth and what you do for Juneteenth, and what does Juneteenth mean to you and your family. And Keith, that clip I just played, you know, it took the federal government a long time to make Juneteenth a federal holiday, which that's just recently happened. Um, so, you know, a lot of people will say, including you and I, will say we've come a long way, but there's a lot that has happened that has probably made some people think, uh, is this union going back? Because Keith, one of the things that really got me, man, was that even when the people found out that they were free, they were not really free. You still had people who figured that they were still slave masters, that they owned these people and they could not leave. And if they tried to leave, they hung them, they murdered them, they beat them. So was that really freedom?
Well, so Virgil, I think what is significant here is that no, although it was announced on January the 1st of 1963. There were still states that fought against the abolishment of slavery. And so, no. And then, that's when you start hearing terms like the indentured servants, where, you're free, but you have to work for so many years. Uh, and in order to earn your keep and then hopefully earn your freedom. And so it was, Juneteenth is special to me because I'm from Texas. And so it took 2 years before it reached Texas that the slavery had ended. And so I know there are people, especially Pam, who is from Tennessee, born in Chicago, raised in Tennessee. She had never heard of Juneteenth until she moved to Texas, and what I mean by that is being celebrated
Celebrate,
as
yeah.
as big as, everybody knows Juneteenth is a day, but to hear is to be in the middle of the celebration as it was in Texas, because that was a milestone for blacks in the state of Texas. And
Yeah.
then I've had the honor of meeting Miss Opal Lee, who is one of the um, historical civil rights icons from Fort Worth, who was very instrumental in getting this law passed in 2021, signed by President, you know, um, President Biden. And so
Making it a national holiday.
making a national holiday. Now,
Yeah.
there was some small businesses that would celebrate, um, but to make it a holiday where it can be celebrated nationwide was a big stepping stone
Hmm.
for this holiday.
Yeah. Well, Keith, there was a movie that was made some years ago about Juneteenth. The lady who played in the movie, I think she was like Miss Juneteenth, and I want to say was it like in the Fort Worth area. It kind of showed,
You must be talking about Miss Opal Lee.
yeah, but somebody played her character.
Played her character, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
her daughter. So she was Miss Juneteenth, and her daughter, when she became, a teenage girl. She ran to become Miss Juneteenth, and she didn't win because it was you kind of saw the behind the scenes local politics and selecting who was going to become Miss Juneteenth. But in Texas, it is real big, as being in the Dallas Fort Worth area, that there is a lot of those cities around the Metroplex that really come out and support Juneteenth. And I mean, with the parades, it just has grown over the years.
Yeah, it's it has, and it continues to grow. And I think, as a law enforcement executive, I found myself explaining these. Matter of fact, let me back up. There was a gentleman that worked for me in Norman, and prior to me getting there, he had made a comment in front of one of our good friends, you and I, good friend.
Yeah.
And basically, here we go again. What's the big deal about Juneteenth? We don't need to take that off. We can. Everybody needs to be working.
Uh-huh.
And if you find yourself having these conversations over and over and over again, however, it's really what I found is Juneteenth, Black History Month, when there's big events. I have found that officers really enjoy. They see the festivities. A lot of them start asking questions of why. Not to necessarily you and I as chiefs, but to the participants in the parades and events and things like that. And a lot of times, officers get history lessons regarding Juneteenth and regarding the dynamics of Juneteenth. And I think a lot of people, I think everything's a learning. Every opportunity is a learning moment. And so we talk about how we have these opportunities to educate. And I've seen that. I know in Little Rock, they had a big Juneteenth celebration at a local park, Centennial Park, if I make no mistake. In the first year, man, there was thousands of people. And so you had officers. There was a parade that led down one of the main streets in Little Rock to the park. And man, they had vendors, all types of games.
Mm-hmm.
And you had officers working that, all ethnicities of officers. And there were officers, actually white officers were asking questions. The thing also about it, you had African-American officers asking questions.
Because they don't know about it.
They don't know about it. And a lot of people know, they hear the words, the Emancipation Proclamation.
Mm-hmm.
They actually think that, in 1863, but there was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of, think about it. Yeah, 2 years later, before the message got to the state of Texas.
Yeah.
So you still had people who were being held in captivity and still property.
And still property of slave owners.
After that, can you just imagine, Virgil, during that time when you have been, your first, second generation, you're talking 1865. So you're talking first, second generation person born into slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And now you're told, you are working the land for someone else who's profiting. You're told what you can do, what you can't do. So now all of a sudden you're told you're free. What do you do? Because I guarantee you, there were a lot of our ancestors who never thought they would be free. So it's
correct.
You dream and you say, I'll do this, but then when it happens, what do? And there were those who ventured out. Vast majority of our ancestors ventured out, and you have your different cities that were heavily populated by African Americans, founded by African Americans, and then you have some that didn't, stay where they were until later years. But and you just imagine that. And then you start asking, what kind of dissension did that cause between individuals who were free and those who were not free?
Yeah.
And, those are things that, as learning history and wanting to learn, what what actually happened, because there had to be some form of dissension there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Keith, you bring up several interesting points. And I want to just remind those who are just now tuning into the podcast show. Tonight's topic is Juneteenth, celebration of freedom. If you got any questions or any comments about Juneteenth, how you celebrate it, whether you don't celebrate it, feel free to put a comment in the chat room. We got quite a few people that are in the chat room right now who've got some comments, and we'll get to those comments here in just a few minutes. But Keith, two things. One of the things you touched on is something that I didn't think you were going to touch on it because I was, but it's good to see that you starting to kind of loosen up. You're starting to kind of loosen up a little bit, but the one thing you brought up the point the topic about police officers, and I really wanted to see how we could put this topic into the conversation of policing, because you mentioned about this officer who was like, here we go again with another holiday like Martin Luther King. Why do we have to have this day? But the unions don't say anything when it comes to this is overtime pay. You get paid for this. You get paid for this holiday. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I know I feel some kind of way, because if you don't have a problem taking that holiday and getting paid that overtime pay, but you've got a problem with, here we go again with another holiday like that, do you do these? And again, when the unions are doing their contract for their officers, I think there should be some conversation about how do police departments or cities educate their departments about Juneteenth, ML King, Black History Month, because until we start making, you can't just force something on officers. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying you don't have a problem with taking the money, but you have a problem with the holiday itself.
Well, I think and that's kind of that's an interesting way to put it. Our job as law enforcement is to work on no matter the days that we're supposed, no matter what, holidays and things like that. I think a lot of times you have individuals who don't celebrate holidays. You have individuals who don't believe in holidays. You have individuals for religious purposes. They don't celebrate holidays. But
hey, Keith, I don't want to interrupt you, but let me say this: nobody has a problem with the 4th of July.
There are people that have a problem with celebrating the 4th of July, because you have to understand too. I've talked. It's just like Hispanic History Month. You have individuals who have a problem who are different ethnicities who have a strong problem celebrating the 4th of July, because they feel that their freedom was not provided on the 4th of July. That as a African American male, a Hispanic male, as other ethnicities, their freedom was not defined on July the 4th. So you have those individuals, and then a lot of it, Virgil. Let's just break it down. A lot of people really don't understand history. I'm not a history expert by no means, nor do I claim it. I'm very careful when I start spurting out things about history. But when I say something, I've done the research or I know it personally.
Mm-hmm.
You just have individuals who just don't think there should be holidays that are celebrated by different ethnicities. You shouldn't have and that's what we're seeing right now going through the nation when we talk about the elimination of DEI. We talk about the elimination of culture diversity training, because for some reason, some believe that when you celebrate the 4th of July, when you celebrate Juneteenth, when you celebrate Black History Month, when you celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, when you celebrate Pride Month. Well, no, Pride Month, when you celebrate, you are basically saying that you're better than others, or that your values, your beliefs, your cultures are better. No, we should celebrate who we are. but some people don't, and I think some people get embarrassed. There's a perception, Virgil, which is reality for some people, that when you and I've heard people say this, and it's not just I'm not just heard whites say this. I've heard blacks say this. Why don't we just get over this and just all get along? Why don't we just, why are we doing this? Why do we have this? Why do we have that? And just, well, history wasn't made that way.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
you can't forget your history.
Yeah.
You have to show pride in your history. I'm proud to be an African American male. I'm proud to say that I'm Ashton Humphrey and Doris Humphrey's son. And there's history there on both sides that go way back. My great grandmother's parents were slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And you hear the story. I hate sometime I didn't sit down and talk to her while she was alive. But my grandfather, my mother kept the things going.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hear those stories, man, it makes you very emotional and just proud that there are that your history and those who made this history possible are being celebrated.
Yeah.
And you should want to. I mean, just it's. But I don't think anybody should have anything forced on them. I totally agree with that. But I do believe that when there's a holiday, I think you have an obligation of responsibility to at least find out more about these holidays and these celebrations, and not think that this is another opportunity for people to get together and drink and shoot guns and kill each other and
Yeah.
things like that, or worried about feeling some inferior to people because they're celebrating this day. I think we've gone beyond that.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at and I believe it's Ankush.
Yeah, Keith, he is a good friend of mine that I've met since I've been in the Minneapolis area. He's listening and watching on LinkedIn, and I'll let you read his comments. But it's good that he is tuned in because he has a good question.
He does, and Ankush, I want to tell you, man, I respect this and I really appreciate this because the only way you learn is that you ask questions. It's not a bad thing to ask questions, and so you're asking what are a few things that I can do or help to celebrate this day. What can I do to teach my son about it? He can read, and he is all about presidents. Any particular president who helped this day? Well, I'll tell you, it goes back to 1865, and people have their beliefs and opinions, but Abe Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. It wasn't delivered in Texas until 2 years later. But the fact of the matter is that Joe Biden, thanks to strong civil rights leaders like Opal Lee and others, continued to push this and was able to get legislation to get it Juneteenth passed as a national holiday. And so I think that anything you can do to learn and talk about and go to events, read, there's always Juneteenth events going on. Take your son to those events.
Exactly.
There's people. Chief Green is one. There's other people I know. Dr. Cedric Alexander, who's a civil rights leader, who's a director for Minneapolis Police Department. There's so many. Sawana Kirkland in that area that can will sit down and explain and talk about Juneteenth, the significance of it, and how we got to where we are. So you're already doing the first thing. You're asking questions.
Yeah.
You're getting your son involved. There's a lot of good materials out there, a lot of good reading, and the thing about it is now there are a lot of good readings for kids. There's a lot of kid-friendly books that talk about holidays like Juneteenth, MLK, Hispanic Heritage Month. We talk about Ramadan. There's a lot of books out there that talk about different celebrations that are celebrated by various cultures and ethnic groups. So, man, I commend you for that. Thank you for that question.
Yeah. Well, and Keith, I'm gonna share this with with Kush, because there's an event that's going on in Golden Valley this weekend. It's called Kumbaya. It is going to take place at Breck School there in Golden Valley, and it's a play put on by a lady that I've met who is very well known in the Twin Cities area. Her name is Rose McGee. She has an organization called Sweet Potato Pie Comfort, and so I went to this Kumbaya Juneteenth last year, and great play. So if you have that opportunity, it's free to the public. There's no cost to it. Actually, it is tomorrow, Friday, June the 16th, at Breck School, and it's free to the public. There's two different plays. One is from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. and then from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And again, and Kush, if you want to reach out to me, and if you want more information, I'll share it with you. But that's a great event to take your kids to, because it's kid friendly, adult friendly, and Keith, just on the other side of that, we've got another one of our listeners who always tunes in, Mr. Tony Hollis out of Arkansas, who says
Tony.
who says, "Hey, I don't support Juneteenth, never have," which he said he plans to share why. So here we have somebody who is non-African American, who is trying to find out what can he do to help celebrate this day, and what can he do to teach his son about it. And then we have Mr. Hollis, who says he doesn't support it. He has his own reasons why, and I'm pretty sure he will share that with us.
No, Tony, he's gonna share it.
Yeah. But and I said it, everybody have their reason, but I think this is the one thing, Keith, that we have so many things to look back at when it relates to Black history. And there's just a Black History Month. Black history should be 365 days a year. And just, talk about, we've talked about what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma with the Black Wall Street, how that happened. We've talked about the massacres that have took place in all around Arkansas, Mississippi, all down through the South. And now Juneteenth is a day where, Black people in Texas were informed 2 years later that they were free. Me personally, and Mr. Hollis, I know you've got your opinion, but me personally, I think, what is it that doesn't, I'm going to ask you this question. What is it that where you don't support something like that? Because again, we're talking about our ancestors, those who we didn't know. And we're talking about people who, they didn't have a choice in that, Keith. They were told, either if you want to leave, there's consequences. But if you stay, you're still going to be under the slave master. So there's just so much to support and to celebrate about it. But even still to this day, there's still struggles that's going on.
Well, Bert, it goes back to, you're free, but you don't know you're free. So if I don't get that information, that there is it's sort of like anything that you don't get the instructions for, directions for. But you got this item that you're trying to put together, but nobody gives you any instructions. And you find that when someone gives you the instructions, after all this work now, it's like, okay, now what am I supposed to do with this now? It's been 2 years, so what am I supposed to do? And it goes down to, when you're used to something, when this is your lifestyle, when this is your life, there is a difficulty transition because I'm free. What does that mean? Well, how am I going to take care of my family?
Mhm.
Uh, where am I going to live? Am I still going to be targeted because there are people who don't agree with this? So can I walk the streets? Can I go into a store and purchase goods? What am I going to purchase it with? So there was a lot of things, and I think just because someone says
Yeah,
you're free, it doesn't automatically answer
that you
all.
have your freedom.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't answer all your. It's not the solution to all your problems because now
Yeah,
you got a whole new set of problems to figure out.
yeah. Well,
Uh,
Keith, and that's a good question, because, well, a comment because can you just imagine you're being told you're free? You got your freedom. You have been on this plantation for decades or years, and now all of a sudden you're being told that you're free. You can go wherever you want to go, but you don't know where you and your family will sleep at. You don't know where you and your family will be able, how you're going to feed yourself. How are you going to get from this place to this place? Because as we, only way to get around was either by walking or by if you had a horse or if you had a buggy. And it took a long time to get to the next place.
well, that's
So that was a lot for people to figure out.
it was, and that's why you have throughout the nation, you have these cities that were founded by African
By
Americans
black. Yeah.
because this is where you settled.
Yeah.
This is where you settled. This is where you had nowhere else to go. You settled this. You made this your
Mhm.
own. You cultivated this and made your own. So that's how these different areas, um, uh, Elaine,
Elaine, Arkansas.
uh,
Yeah. Boley,
Rosewood,
Rosewood,
Bowling.
Boley, Oklahoma.
Yeah, and so that's why you have, and then up north, and then you had the great migrations of African Americans in the 40s, let's see, 30, 40, 50s, 60s to Detroit, California,
Hmm.
and things like that up to Seattle, Portland. So, and I get it that some people, I get it. Tony that may not agree. That's fine. That's his right. But man, that's amazing. And that um, that I can just only imagine uh, back then that what that was like. Um, I can only imagine how much stress. We talk about. I don't believe. We talk about hypertension and we talk about diabetes and things like that being, prevalent in the African American community. Um, but can you just imagine back then the exposure, the stress? People say, "Oh man, people were really in good shape back then." People, the food was. Oh man, stress is stress.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
lot of stress because then you didn't have medication, you didn't have access to doctors,
yeah.
you had a lot of diseases that were going along. Nobody knew what the cure was. So can you just imagine back then how much stress and how much confusion and things were going on?
Well, Keith, and it goes to show you just the desire to and the will to live between the African Americans, Native Americans, because here you are, you're being told that, you know, uh, you got to figure this out. Nobody's handing you, nobody's giving you anything. The government wasn't taking care of people. You didn't have the type of social services back then that you do now. And so, and I think the one thing as we talk about this here and going back to and Kush question, what can he do to learn about it? What can he do to celebrate about it? If you really kind of think about this, we have to look at our ancestors, the things that they dealt with are things that we wouldn't I don't think we could do that in today's time, Keith.
And I think the times are different. I think we talk about those. The strength, the faith, the courage of our ancestors back then. Man, I don't think you can even try to compare it to today because the things that we have today, everything back then was taken from nothing. They made it from nothing. Uh, and so that doesn't negate the fact of the accomplishments that we're making, that we have made, but we can never go back and minimize those things, the stress, the environment, the dehumanization and making you feel as though that you are, that you don't even believe in yourself.
Mhm.
But the stress, but
Yeah.
but also the resilience of knowing that you have African American HBCUs that were developed. A lot of the products that we use today were developed by those same individuals that either fled slavery or that were a product of the Emancipation Proclamation. Just the resilience and the fight, fight through it. That says a lot. And if nothing else, man, we need to stand on that resilience and that historical values, the faith of those individuals
Hmm.
who, if they had not fought, if they had not died, we would not be here.
Yeah.
And so that's why I feel as though personally that Black History Month is 365 days a year. That's why I believe that days like Juneteenth is every day, and it should be celebrated every day. The July the 4th is a freedom that we weren't privy to for years.
Exactly.
And people have to realize this, and I know that there's a big push throughout the nation, Virgil, to minimize, like I said earlier, um, ethnic teaching about African American history or other histories and things like that, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know there was a big push, and you see it just this week. Several states have signed that. Governors have signed those laws.
And Keith, the one thing about
But you can't take facts and history away.
no,
And so my thing is, the more that's pushed, I think the louder we need to be, the stronger we need to be, the higher platform that, listen, you can take these things from us, but we're not going anywhere, and we're not going to stand silent about the accomplishments that we continue to make.
yeah. Well, Keith, two quick things. When you talk about states that are limiting or restricting DEI, DEI has not been around in the corporate world that long, or in higher ed that long. I just several years ago, probably within the last, I don't know, I'm gonna say the last 6 years or maybe even less, you had the University of Oklahoma hired their first diversity, equity, and inclusion person. You start seeing universities within the last couple of years started to hire diversity, equity, inclusion directors or managers. So all of a sudden, something that has just been in the corporate world and higher ed the last couple of years, now all of a sudden you have individuals like the governor out in Florida, like the governor in Texas, in the governor in Oklahoma, in Arkansas, who are saying, "Oh no, we're going to remove that," and hey, now those because what they know, those positions were state funded. So now that's not a state funded position. So now that person loses their job. And so you have to ask yourself again, the why. And I'm still waiting on Mr. Hollis, and I maybe he put a comment in the
He
in the
just
chat
said it.
room.
He just said it. Yeah.
He puts in the chat room. He says if a woman was kidnapped and repeat sexual assaulted, raped by her oppressor for 11 months, but she finally escapes and now free of her rapist. Now that was a very long, painful, and traumatic situation. So, will you agree that this is something that she cares nothing to, that she cares not to remember, let alone celebrate? Sorry, gentlemen. But personally, I see no personal benefit in celebrating slavery. Therefore, I reject one premise that this is an event that's worthy to be celebrated. I respect what you say, Mr. Hollis, and I think as with all this is all about uh, having that informative conversation, as well as you have informative conversations on your podcast as well. And I think once again, this is all about education and teaching a generation of kids who don't know too much about Juneteenth. And then also people our age really don't know anything about Juneteenth based upon where they were raised at around the United States. But I'm really trying to, and I don't know, Keith, that comparison, I'm not really kind of understanding that comparison of a woman being kidnapped and raped versus the comparison. And we're not celebrating slavery. This isn't celebrating slavery. This is basically saying that it took 2 years for people in Texas to be informed that they were free. Even when they were told that they were free, you still had slave masters saying, no, you're not free, and we're going to kill you, or we're going to brutalize you if you try to leave. So
well, let me say this, Virgil. First of all, I agree. Tony, thank you for your statement. And that's what makes this country great. You have your right to your opinion. Nobody should be able to try to get you to believe what they believe. But first of all, I've never heard anybody celebrate slavery. What I've heard people celebrate the ending of slavery, celebration of the ending of slavery.
Yeah.
So I've never heard anybody say, well, let's celebrate slavery. I've heard people say, let's remember those who were enslaved and those who fought and lost their lives. Let's celebrate celebrate them and what they went through, and let's don't forget them. But the Juneteenth is not about celebrating slavery.
No,
it's about the celebration of the ending of slavery. And in 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, 2 years later, people found out. That's the deal. Now, I don't see. I'm like Pam is saying here. I don't see the
correlation.
Here. I don't see it. And at the end of the day, you would not celebrate. Absolutely, you would not celebrate someone being kidnapped, repeatedly sexually assaulted by somebody. But what you would do is celebrate the freedom of this person. This person's able to be free. This young lady would be able to be free and start a life on becoming a survivor. You never celebrate the act. And I've never heard anybody say you celebrate. I think people remember history and remember slavery, but this is all about remembering the freedom of. That's what that's about.
Yeah,
I don't get it as if it's celebrating slavery.
No. Well, and Keith, and I have to say this, and I think Mr. Hollis, I think when you put that into context about the kidnapping, the person being sexually assaulted and raped for 11 months, using that theory behind that, how women are traumatized for a very long time by their spouse or significant other, and they can't find a way to get out of that situation. And so when they do get out of that situation, it takes them a long time to recover from that. And so do they at some point celebrate that they've gotten away from that and that their life has changed? Maybe they do, but I think to compare these two are different. And I think the one thing that I'm gonna add to this is the fact that we all come from descendants of slaves. And so when we come from descendants of slaves, how can we not look back and celebrate and acknowledge what our ancestors went through? And the fact that, as you mentioned, Keith, it took 2 years for that message to get to Texas, and the other parts of the country were, they were aware of this. So again, it kind of reminds you when, Keith, and I wanted to, man, there's this movie about, and this hits this on point. And I don't know if you've seen this movie. Here's a guy who was a free man. Some kind of way he ends up getting a very well educated free man, has a family. Some kind of way he ends up being bought by a slave, and he is sent to he goes to a plantation. He is telling everybody that this is what his name is, this is what he does. They're saying he's some uppity, Negro and all this.
12 years. You talking about 12 years a slave?
That may be the movie, 12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave. 12 Years a Slave. Now, here's a man who was free, but then he spent 12 years as a slave, and it took 12 years for him to get out of slavery. That is something that I don't know if those who are watching the podcast or who will listen to the podcast, go and watch that movie, 12 Years a Slave. And I think this puts into perspective another conversation about Juneteenth and the fact it took 2 years for Texas to be told that they were free. But here's a man who was free, but then he was bought by a slave master and spent 12 years as a slave.
Well, you have to also, Virgil, they signed that the Juneteenth holiday into law in 2021, but every city does not have to
acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it.
Or even, as a paid holiday or
and
just a holiday.
And so there are those cities that have the choice of choosing which day they want to. Do they want to celebrate MLK, or do they want to celebrate President's Day? Do they want to celebrate Juneteenth? So just because it was signed off on it's not, every city is not mandated to recognize it as far as giving people a day off and things like that. There are cities that have selected to do that.
Yeah.
A lot of cities have selected to do that. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So Keith, I want to play a video real quick, and this is a Martin Luther King video, and I think when we talk about our podcast, You and the Law, and we talk about Juneteenth, and we talk about the fact that there are things that Black people are still dealing with that they dealt with in 1863 and throughout, history. And, Keith, I was watching something that was on TikTok where this lady was speaking to a group of senators at some type of a hearing. And this was in 1962. She was from Inola, Mississippi. And she was talking about the right to vote. And as I'm sitting here listening to her conversation, Keith, the president, then President Lyndon Johnson, called a press conference to get the media away from her speech. And I'm sitting here thinking about this, Keith. You and I were born in 63. And I'm sitting here thinking this was in 62. And I'm sitting here thinking that our parents and our grandparents didn't have the freedom to vote. And the one thing that she said that is still in my mind is that all she wanted to do was to be treated like she was a recognized citizen. And you sit there and you think about it, it's like that wasn't that long ago, Keith. That's just some 50 something years ago. that our parents and our grandparents were not looked upon as that was the word she said, first class citizens. Black people were not considered to be first class citizens. And so when we talk about celebrating Juneteenth and acknowledging Juneteenth, it is more to just Juneteenth, Keith. This is about things that our grandparents, our parents, our grandparents, our great grandparents went through. And then you look at what we have to deal with in our profession when you talk about police brutality. And I want to play this clip real quick before as we come up on the last 10 minutes of the show.
We walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied.
You know, Keith, just that 30-second clip where you talk about Black people can never be satisfied, and when you talk about police brutality and you talk about the unjust that Black people have had to overcome and deal with, and we're having this conversation about the celebration of Juneteenth, there's a lot that I think we need to really have these conversations with each other about it, to agree to disagree. But I think there is so much. Mr. Hollis has put another comment in the chat room. He said, I guess he's asked the question, would you agree that the word celebrate is more so of happy times or turn of events such as birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, MLK Day, etc. All of the above was events that impacted our life in a special way. That is a joy to remember and most definitely celebrate. Again, respectfully disagree, and thanks for the dialogue. And again,
I still say that's not even so. Yeah. Basically, what you said, I guess, and Tony, hey man, I appreciate the dialogue. I love having these type of dialogues, and as I said before, man, I respect your opinion, but I will say that to be free from years of dehumanization, from years of beating, from years of belittling, from years of watching horrid images and acts being done, to be free and know that you have an opportunity to start your life and do that is a celebration. Celebrating the freedom. Oh, yeah. Yes, you celebrate the freedom. That's a joyous time.
And I'm gonna ask him this question. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, people celebrate that event that took place on Black Wall Street, where so many hundreds of Blacks were killed. So, and I guess my question, Mr. Hollis, should we not celebrate what took place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with the Tulsa race riot, the massacre that took place there in Tulsa?
I think. Let me say this. I think it's a semantical thing. I think it's we remember,
and we
celebrate the accomplishments. We remember the tragedies, and we celebrate the fact that we were able to overcome that.
Yeah,
I think I don't know if it's a semantical thing with Tony or whatever, but the deal is we do remember. Yes, you remember. You're gonna remember.
Yeah,
that's history. History, you are to remember history. You're gonna remember. There are just some people. There are gonna be things in your past you're gonna remember whether you want to or not. And you want to remember.
And you got to think, and Mr. Hollis, you living in a state now where you've got people, legislators, who are trying to take that away, where history will not be taught in schools throughout the state of Arkansas.
You're in the heart of civil rights, discrimination, and segregation. Central High, Little Rock, where that happened. So do we remember? We remember the attacks on those students, the Little Rock Nine, but we
Yeah.
celebrate the fact that they were able to. They had the faith and the strength to get through that. That's a celebration.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Keith, as we coming up on the last 5 minutes of the podcast, man, I knew this would be a good topic. Man, for some reason, I come up with these good topics for our podcast.
Well, don't do that.
Man.
Don't do that. don't do that. Because you can come up with it, you can't do it until I sign off on it.
Yeah. So for those who are just now tuning into the podcast, we definitely thank you for tuning in. But tonight's topic is Juneteenth, celebration of freedom. As everybody knows, this weekend is so many communities and so many states around the United States will be coming together to celebrate Juneteenth. I'm actually going back to my hometown where I grew up at in Hobbs, New Mexico, to celebrate. I am, Keith. Man, to be asked to be the grand marshal of the Juneteenth parade
in Hobbs.
In Hobbs, they could have asked anybody else. They could have chose anybody else, but
Hobbs wanted you.
But yeah, and I have to say this, Keith. I said this in a media interview that who would ever think that a kid from Hobbs, Mexico, would leave and come to Oklahoma to follow a career in law enforcement, be a police chief in Oklahoma, be a police chief in Arkansas, and now be a police chief up in Minnesota.
Well, you know what, Virgil, I'm proud of you, man, and you're absolutely right, man. And so those are the things that we celebrate. We remember our families that sacrificed for us to be in these positions. I think about my grandfather. I think about my grandmother. I think about my mother. And I was before we go, I have to say, Pam said the only way to celebrate the Tulsa riot would be to pay reparations to those whose properties were destroyed. Pay their descendants their financial losses. And yeah, Tony, I don't think you want to get into that debate with Pam. I think that's one you better probably.
We would have to. We would need to.
That's all. We'd be here an hour or two, and she's not gonna sit down, man.
Yeah, and we would need to have another podcast about Juneteenth, the celebration of freedom. But Keith, I want to say, man, we're coming up on the last few minutes of the podcast. This has been a great show, another great topic, and it's good that we had this type of engagement, and hopefully people will get out as Ankush and will take his son to some of these events and learn about the history of Juneteenth and how you celebrate Juneteenth, because it is a celebration of freedom.
It is, man, and freedom is nothing that should be taken lightly, because I know I have relatives and ancestors, man, that died for freedom, and so I don't take it. So yeah, when you can celebrate freedom, celebrate the Renaissance, the rebirth, the freedom, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's that's so if you haven't ever been to a Juneteenth celebration, I suggest you.
I would highly
recommend
find one in your community. Go and enjoy the atmosphere, enjoy the food, enjoy these plays that are being put on, and just embrace the culture, and because I guarantee you will end up going to another Juneteenth in your city. So brother, man, it's been another, as always, Swaggy One. It's been a pleasure.
Say, man, safe travels to you, man. And I kid you about Hobbs, man, but I will tell you this, man. I was in New Mexico a few years ago, man. The hospitality there was great. So I kid you, but I know really good people from Hobbs.
Yeah.
It's like you kid me from being from West Dallas and Oak Cliff.
Yeah, Oak Cliff. And you know, I got family in Oak Cliff too, man.
Dude, where your family? Okay, before we go off the air, I am so tired of people saying that they are from Dallas and from Oak Cliff,
Mm-hmm.
and they live in Mesquite.
No,
that's not South Dallas. That's not Oak Cliff.
They live right off of Keith Boulevard.
You don't have any relatives that live in Oak Cliff.
I do, and they probably, some of them are probably listening to the podcast. So if you all know the Humphreys that lived in South Oak Cliff, and I got the Callaway family who lived in South Oak Cliff off of Keith Boulevard, you know, hey, I'm just telling you.
That was probably that family that sold Now Laters out the back of the Now Laters and pickles and pixie straws and out the back door.
You know, I believe my cousins told me that their mom did have a little store out of their house, because, you know, back then a lot of families had, you know, they sold pickles, they sold, you know, other little candy, and that was the neighborhood store. So, but yeah, man, I spent a lot of summers, family reunions in South Oak Cliff. And
Virgil, if you spend any time in South Oak Cliff as a little boy, I know at some point you got beat up.
I never got beat up, man. Never did.
You're not gonna tell them.
No, I never. I didn't get up. I didn't get beat up like you did. You know.
All right. On that note,
hey man. Hey everybody. Wish everybody a happy Juneteenth. Get out and celebrate Juneteenth. And Mr. Hollis, I know you're in Arkansas, so man, you're gonna have to cross somebody who is celebrating Juneteenth. And
I'm pretty sure Centennial Park in Little Rock.
Yeah,
you're gonna have a lot of
I think Mr. Hollis is down close to Osceola and in that part of Arkansas. So yeah, but everybody enjoy the weekend. Celebrate the holiday, and you know, tune in next Thursday for another informative topic on You and the Law podcast show with Chief Swaggy One and your co-host Virgil Green, and we'll see. And as always, go to our Facebook page, like our Facebook page, share our Facebook page. If you miss any parts of this podcast, you can follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search You and the Law podcast, and you will be able to listen to our rebroadcast podcast shows. So have a good weekend, and we will see you next Thursday on You and the Law podcast show.
Happy Juneteenth.
Get your hands up, yeah.